Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the wandering youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. I say wandering because you wandered off last week without even telling me. Just go on vacation, and you're like, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm on vacation. You're going to have to do the shows by yourself this week. Thanks. But how was your vacation?
Yeah, first of all, I'll say this. It feels like I haven't, and I'm assuming that, well, I know all of last week. Troy and I, we didn't do a show. We do at least 3, sometimes 4 podcasts every single week. But so we didn't do any together last week. I know you held the fort on a number of them. But so 2 weeks ago, the 17th, we're recording this on the 30th, May 30th. I believe it was the 17th is the last time we talked, which it feels like an eternity. It always feels that way when there's a little break for whatever reason between our shows, and it feels like an eternity. I know you've got a number of things that have happened to you over those 13 days, as well as myself. None of them for the both of us seem to be that fantastic, unfortunately. But my vacation as a whole, I'll start with this. I'll keep it as short as possible. My vacation as a whole was good, but Thursday the 24th, I left Wisconsin back to Florida the 26th. But so the 24th, I found out, I was scrolling through Twitter, and one of my Land of 10, for those who listen to this show, obviously care about the Big Ten, Land of 10, those that listen on a fairly regular basis know that I write for them. One of the full-time writers there had a tweet saying, hey, our overarching company that owns our site said that this site is going to be kaput, done, over, no longer funded, done, as of the end of June. So that put a damper on my vacation. But vacation itself was good, saw family, saw friends. But I am looking for a writing gig, anything sports related. I'm here. I'm eligible for hire. Feel free to message me on Twitter at
Youngster, the bad things always happen on vacation.
It's terrible.
They always happen on vacation. So if you're listening to this and you need a sports writer, you got to find the youngster. He's a good writer. I'll pat you on the back. You're a very good writer. You're a very good co-host with me. That's why I invited you to come on the show. It's because I think you're good at what you do. But if there's anybody out there that knows of any company that needs a writer, get in touch with the youngster. I had to interrupt there. You know, now it makes my stuff seem kind of not even relevant. That's bad news, youngster. I thought you were going to give me like some great news, like something great happened when you went back to the old state of Wisconsin because that's where you were vacationing. I was like, man, maybe he got a new gig. Maybe he's working for the Brewers. Maybe he's working for the Badgers. And you gave me the total opposite.
Yeah, but, and in the end, I got no job. So
it'll be good, youngster. You're good. You're a talented young man, so everything will be fine. Yeah, but this is a Big Ten show, and I'll go quickly. You know, my last week, we lost our good friend Gizmo a couple weeks ago. And then last week, my buddy, Oreo, 13 years old, I had to put him down. My wife called me while I was at work one day and said he can't move his back legs. The doctor thinks he had a stroke. He was paralyzed. And, you know, Kevin, at that point, you got to do what's right for, you know, your buddy. You can't have him in pain. So it was tough. I mean, it really was. 13 years had that old man. He was almost as old as me, actually, and dog years older than me. But he was a good, loyal friend of mine and used to walk him a lot. So I'm going to miss him a lot. But, you know, Oreo, you will be remembered. So then that happened. And then literally not even 24 hours later, Kevin, my car, the wheel popped off. Like literally the wheel came out of the ball joint. So I have no car.
We have great car.
Well, that car is gone. That car is done, gone. I'm actually buying a new one. Well, not a new one. I'm buying a little beater that's good on gas because you know I drive I drive a total of 2.5 hours every day to and from work. That's just my commute to work. That's not including that I drive around all day to go to, 16 to 20 accounts. So I'm going to buy a little beater car that gets good gas mileage, like a Neon or a Ford Fusion or something like that gets really good gas mileage. Because I spent a lot on gas in that stupid Avenger. Never buy a Dodge Avenger, anybody. Never buy a Dodge Avenger. Nothing but problems. And then yesterday, Kevin, I was coming out of an account. I go into freezers and coolers all day. I had phones in the pocket. I took them out of my pocket because it was hot out. I put the phones on top of the car. I decided to drive off with the phones on top of the car, and I heard clunk, clunk as I'm on the highway. I went back to try to retrieve my phones, and no luck. Shattered. Found the case. But, yeah, my phones are gone. New phone number. But today's a better day. June will be a better month for both of us. Let's talk some sports. I think that's the one thing that will make you and I feel better, talking a little Big Ten sports, baseball, softball. We guarantee, we actually promise the listeners, today's show, only going to be about 10 or 15 minutes. Promise you. Got it, youngster? Take it away.
Yeah, from this point, because it's been 6 minutes already, and I have to say, too, Gizmo was, and I'm sorry for your loss, Troy, with Oreo. I obviously know how it goes with Gizmo. But that was my currently fiance's parents' dog, which we would live with them, so obviously cared about Gizmo with him being around the house constantly. But so the parents, my fiance's parents, got a new dog, and his name is Gadget. Gizmo, Gadget, I think you get the idea there. But so they say he's 3 years old. He does not act 3 years old. He acts like he's a new puppy, basically. So if you do hear barks, which is almost inevitable, it's not as though he barks a ton, but he is louder than, I shouldn't say louder than Gizmo, more active than Gizmo, more active than the other dog, which you never hear on this show. But so if you hear barking, that's what it is. I can't do anything about it. He acts like a puppy. I apologize ahead of time. He's going to be a common guest on the show, even though he doesn't exactly know it. But in any case, we'll move to baseball, softball, Big Ten action. Just wanted to give a quick update on those before we move on to next week. But so Big Ten softball. Softball, the regional play took place, I believe, a couple weeks ago. Super regionals took place. Now we've got 8 teams left in the NCAA tournament for softball. There were 5 Big Ten teams that made the NCAA tournament as a whole. 64 teams, not 68, Troy. Believe it or not, there are no first 4.
Wow, they kept even numbers. Way to go,
Man.
Big Ten. Way to go, Big Ten. Getting some representation. I do want to say this before we continue on. 5 softball teams from the Big Ten, though. That is good representation from the Big Ten for softball. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. When you look at baseball and softball in the Midwest, or especially the Big Ten, to me a little more difficult to have great teams due to the fact that you're hampered inside for months. You're not outside all the time. And it's totally different going from a gym, even an AstroTurf field. If you do not have a full indoor practice facility, some of these schools do, but if you don't, I mean, you're going from the inside, and unless your home is an indoor dome, and I don't believe any of the Big Ten schools have an indoor softball field where they play on, now you're going to grass and dirt. And you can't simulate that inside, Kevin. So I wanted to give my props. 5 Big Ten teams in the national tournament for softball, that's awesome in my mind.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I have to say this. We talk about it with football. Basketball, typically there are bigger expectations in the state of Indiana because it's known for its basketball. And Indiana is not obviously the warmest place in the world. It certainly can snow in Indiana. But typically, you have states in the South, let's say for football, that just care more, and 12 months out of the year in Alabama, in Florida. That's why there's a load of great football prospects in Florida and California and Texas, because they can play it 12 months out of the year. 365 days, basically. You can go to any football field, any court for basketball, and you just have more prospects there. And it's easier for teams there to recruit there. It's the same in hockey. Nobody cares about hockey in the state of Florida. They don't. Trust me, I've lived here for about 15 years. They don't care about hockey here. And that's fine. You're not going to have great hockey teams in the state of Florida. There's never going to be Miami, Florida State, Florida, pushing around Wisconsin and Michigan and Minnesota in hockey. It just doesn't happen. In hockey, Big Ten, up north, snow, it's just part of the culture. And so you have 3 Big Ten teams in the Final Four, the Frozen Four this past year. I mean, that's just the way it goes geography-wise. Recruiting-wise, it's easier to recruit teams if you're Alabama to recruit top kids in your own school. And if you're Wisconsin and you're searching for softball players that can't play softball as a kid growing up during certain months like they can in Florida or Texas or California, it's just harder. So that's the simple explanation. So, yes, Troy, to your shorter point, 5 Big Ten teams in the NCAA tournament, I think it's a great job by the Big Ten. Unfortunately, in every single one of these regionals, just to go over the format very quickly to help with baseball, the softball tournament, same as baseball, NCAA tournaments, College World Series, it goes, basically you have 16 different pods of 4, and the top-ranked team in those pods of 4 get to host. Like Oregon was the number 1 team in softball. They hosted the Eugene Regional. In Kentucky, they were the 16 seed. They hosted their regional right next to Oregon in Lexington, Kentucky. And then you've got all those 4 teams in each of these pods playing double elimination brackets to see who makes it out of regionals to super regionals. Then if you make it out of super regionals, you get to the College World Series. Fairly simple stuff. They're little pods of 4, 16 pods of 4 to make up 64 teams. The best team is hosting. So 5 Big Ten teams made it. None of them were hosts. None of them made it to super regionals, unfortunately. I'm not going to get into the losses, get into how close these teams were to advancing. But again, overall picture, Big Ten softball getting 5 teams in, I think that's pretty good. You can say it's a disappointment that none made it to super regionals, made it out of the regional, but none of them were supposed to. None of them hosted. So it's not exactly a disappointment. You didn't have a bunch of 1 seeds hosting teams, losing in their own backyard to teams that they shouldn't have. So that's my quick softball review. I'm ready for baseball whenever you are, Troy.
Well, I already said my 2 cents worth here. I'm proud of the Big Ten and, to be able to have 5 softball teams in there. And as you were talking, Kevin, I was kind of thinking, double elimination, which is great because, 1 will play 4, 2 will play 3, and then the winners advance, and then the winner goes on to play the winner of the loser game. What about this thought, youngster? What if the basketball tournament did that? I mean, I don't want to do it. I don't want to get – maybe we'll talk about that next week because we're going to keep this show very short. But I was just thinking about that. I was thinking about the ideas because, you lose, you still got a chance. You're a good team. Maybe you get upset, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So put that in your back pocket. Guess what our topic is next week? We're going to at least throw that in next week. Let's move on to baseball, though. This could be exciting. I mean, it hasn't started yet, but it could be exciting for the Big Ten.
Yeah. No, as a whole, if that's what basketball decided to go to, I'd be all in favor of it, because I think that's part of the beauty of March Madness is that literally anybody can beat anybody in one game. You're good enough to win your conference tournament, or you're good enough to be an at-large team, then you can beat the number 1 team in the country in one game. UMBC, Virginia, it just goes to show you that literally anybody in the tournament can beat any other team in one game. That's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it dramatic. It just takes one team to hit 5 more threes, 6 more threes, 7 more threes than the other team, and it's over. So whether that's fair, it's not. Realistically, if you really want to get the best teams forward, you do something like the NBA does where it's best of 7s all the way through. Obviously, you're not going to do that with 68 teams, but that's the point. That's what makes March Madness interesting. But, yeah, if you really want the best teams more so to advance and make it fair that way, and you'll still have some Cinderellas for sure. Not every single host team in softball, for example, advanced. Most of them, it looks like, did, but not every single one of them. So I'll say this, that I like your idea, Troy. I don't know if it's perfect, but I think it's a lot more fair. I think it's interesting. I think, especially in Double-A.
Well, I do want to throw this in, youngster. I like it and dislike it because of what you said, though. I like the idea of one and done. I love it. I just love it. But we'll talk next week. Again, we want to keep this show short. We'll bring it up because there's not going to. We'll have an update on Big Ten baseball. But I was just thinking of that when you were talking about these little pods and thinking, man, of course they did that for the NCAA tournament. But again, there's some pros to it. There's some cons to it. So, next week, let's go over the pros and cons. Move on to baseball, youngster. I'm excited to talk about Big Ten baseball. Not in depth, just in an overall view, but it's, again, a good representation for the Big Ten. I'm happy that Big Ten has, not just one team in the national tournament. They've got multiple teams. You're going to share those teams with us here quickly.
Yeah. Quick recap here. Bracket was revealed. No games have been played to this point. I need to look up when the games actually take place. I'm sure it starts probably tomorrow as we're recording the show on, again, Wednesday, May 30th. But 4 Big Ten teams made it. Again, there's no complaints there. I'll say this, that Purdue is a number 2 seed in the North Carolina region. So they're off to Chapel Hill to play against North Carolina, Houston, North Carolina A&T. It's actually interesting. North Carolina A&T is a 4 seed in that little pot of 4, and yet because they're in the state of North Carolina, they get to play literally in their home state, even as the 4 seed. But in any case, Purdue, the number 2 seed there. Ohio State is the number 3 seed in their pod. I believe I told you before the show that Ohio State got a 2. They didn't. They got a 3. They're in South Carolina. East Carolina is actually the host school there, but South Carolina is also there. In any case, Ohio State is a number 3 seed in their pot of 4. Indiana is a number 2 seed in their pot of 4. They're going to Texas, Austin, Texas. Texas is the host school there. So none of those 3 are, quote-unquote, supposed to make it out. But the last Big Ten team, not necessarily to make it, but the last one that I'm sharing with you guys listening is Minnesota, who is hosting. They're hosting in Minneapolis, hosting UCLA, Gonzaga, and Canisius. Canisius, I've heard of once every 8 years, seem to make the NCAA tournament for basketball. That's the only way I know of that school. But so, yeah, Minnesota got a number 1 seed. They're supposed to, supposedly, advance on to super regionals. But, yeah, very cool for a Big Ten baseball school to be hosting at this time of the year in the NCAA tournament. Again, Minnesota's with UCLA, Gonzaga, Canisius. I know absolutely nothing about those 3 schools. But, again, Minnesota hosting in Minneapolis, their little regional, which I think is pretty cool. It's the only Big Ten baseball or softball team to host its regional. And next week's show, we'll be able to obviously talk about what happened. But as a whole, again, I can't get into specifics, honestly, because I just don't know. But Purdue's a number 2 seed. Indiana's a 2 seed in their little pot of 4. Ohio State's a 3 seed. And Minnesota's hosting as a 1 seed.
Well, if you look at it, Kevin, we talked about it before the Big Ten tournament, how you had almost like basketball. You had your group of elite teams, and then you had another group right down there below them. And in baseball, a little bit harder. But what I'm real impressed with Big Ten baseball, again, geography is always going to be at a disadvantage when you're talking about baseball or softball. But you look at Minnesota, number 1 seed. Ohio State was a 3, correct?
Yes.
So not a great seed, but it's not a number 4 seed. They're number 3. And then you got Indiana and Purdue, both number 2 seeds. So you had very good representation, 4 teams, a number 1, 2 2s, and a 3. So hopefully, Minnesota will cruise through their regional and get into the super regional, and then maybe Indiana, Purdue, or Ohio State can pull an upset and get through that regional. To be honest, Kevin, you talk about March Madness and it's only 1 game. Well, in baseball, it's only 2 games. If you go through, if you win, if you're the 2 seed, beat the 3, and then well, I guess you got to win 3. You got to win 3 games.
Yeah.
But you look at it, you get hot pitching, and your hitting's on for a weekend, man, that's all you need. Any sport, that if your team gets hot and you're clicking, it can carry over. So good luck. to all 4 Big Ten teams. I'm not going to get into game by game. I'm not going to get into specific schools. Again, my hat's off to the Big Ten baseball programs that are in the national tournament, and hopefully we're talking about teams advancing next week. So all I got, youngster. I don't think you have anything else unless you got something quick for the listeners before we let them go.
Now, last thing, Minnesota won their last 9 games going into the NCAA tournament. Won the Big Ten tournament, obviously, by winning 9 straight games. That goes to show they won the Big Ten tournament. So they're hot. 41-13 overall. They're not, they didn't just win the Big Ten tournament and now they're in. It's, 41-13 overall. I would have to check, their literal AP ranking or however, the NCAA does it. But Minnesota, I think it's cool. I think I'd be surprised if we're talking a week from now, Troy, and there are 0 Big Ten teams in the Super Regional, which is cool. Then we can actually get more in-depth. But, you also want to talk about little formatting thing that could be done for basketball tournament, which I think will be cool as well to talk about. But we can get more in-depth with, hopefully, at least one Big Ten team that makes it through. Next week's show, we're a little over 20 minutes now. We said we wanted to keep it short. We're keeping it short, Troy. I'm done. I'll shut up.
Yep. Adios. Goodbye, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this week's show. Sorry that there's not more to talk about, but that's just the way Big Ten sports is rolling right now. Baseball and softball. We'll talk more baseball next week, and then like Kevin said, we're going to talk about formatting, pros and cons of a pod idea. Have a good week, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.